All right, after everybody gets settled back into their seats, we are ready to resume class. Again, we are discussing the legendary Chris Claremont and his run on the X-Men, more specifically, the Dark Phoenix Saga.
And where we left off, Cyclops and Angel had just had a conversation about what had been going on. Jean Grey came in the end. Angel decided to bail and give him some couples time. And one of the beautiful things they do here is Jean Grey says, "Yo, let's take a break. Let's relax." And the first thing she does is she goes to take off his visors. And he's like, what are you doing? Like, he's lived his whole life. Well, not his whole life, but his whole adult life, knowing that the moment that comes off, he can seriously harm the people he loves. But at this moment, they do this great... I mean, it's only 3 panels, but what it shows is amazing. It shows that she is so powerful that she can, through the power of her mind, stop his eyes from being destructive. At the same time, she's saying, "Yo, let go. Let's be people. Let's be in love. Let's worry about all that other stuff later." It builds them as individuals, it builds their relationship, and it builds the threat at the same time.
Her very powerful stuff. Her confidence is not only extreme, but it is in so much abundance that it's nonchalant to her to tell him, like, it's okay, open your eyes, everything's going to be fine.
Yeah, there wasn't a moment of doubt. She didn't test it beforehand.
Not an ounce.
Yeah. After that, Claremont has established a new status quo. These are the X-Men. This is where they're at right now. Now that they have that information, now that they have their in with Angel, they're going to take the fight to the Hellfire Club. So they set the scene. They give us Wolverine and Nightcrawler in the basement, in the sewers, heading there under, in the tunnels, because, let's be honest, if Nightcrawler showed up at the gathering, there'd be some issues. And Wolverine, well, let's be honest, there would be issues if Wolverine showed up in the front door, too.
Yes, absolutely.
So they think ahead. They go to cut some lines. Everyone else has gotten, and by everyone else I mean Cyclops, Jean, Storm, and Colossus, have gotten invites because of Angel. Now, Angel is hanging back because he's not been in the fights for a while. He's, in this era, superheroes are allowed to retire without having to join another team or get crippled or murdered or something. So he's, hanging back with the professor as the others head to the club. As you hit the club, Donald Pierce notices who's showing up. He's like, "Yo, look who's at our front door." Like, he sees Jean. And even though she's dressed up and not in a costume, he doesn't see what's going on. So at which point the Hellfire Club is like, "Yo, you've been telling us for how long that she's going to be here? Do it." So he goes to bring her into the fold. So Cyclops and Jean are dancing. He shows up, spins her around, and the moment he spins her, like, she's back into that past. And at this point, it's not something strange that she slips into, but something that she's embraced.
Yeah, there's a certain level of comfort
and freedom that she's really enjoying. And what I love here is that in the last panel, in New Mexico, which is where you had the last scene, she finally told him about the time slips. So not only is it like the her that she is in the time slips is slipping through into our reality, she's more forward, she's more confident, she, takes what she wants, but her relationship has moved forward too, because these things she never would have mentioned to Cyclops in the past.
Right.
Is something that they've talked about. For him, he's seeing it's the same guy with the same name as the one from the time slip, and he's starting to put together that something's going on here. As Wingard has Jean kind of swept up in this moment, Cyclops notices that it's Mastermind, and then he's finally able to start tracking what's going on. But it's a little too late, because in this reality, because Jean is in the time slip, and in the time slip she can use her powers any way she wants to. And she is the Black Queen there. So she blasts Cyclops. This calls the X-Men into action, which is when we get to meet the Hellfire Club members in fight settings, so they get to show off their powers. Which brings us to something that Claremont is amazing at, is matchups. Like, they're on the Hellfire Club's turf on their terms, and the Hellfire Club starts mopping the floor with them. Like, Colossus is, using all his power and beating on Sebastian Shaw, and that's only making him stronger and only making the fight worse for them. So he starts slapping him around. Wolverine and Nightcrawler come in only to find Donald Pierce, who is more than a match for Nightcrawler physically, but not for Wolverine. So Harry Leland shows up and quickly disposes of him. But for the sake of Wolverine, it's something that would have killed anyone else is only going to leave him stunned. And that's not quite something they've planned for. Sebastian Shaw, on the other hand, is just brutal enough where Storm in such an enclosed area can't take him. Like, if she had been able to pull it outside, she'd have struck him with lightning, she'd have frozen him, something would have happened. But with all the strength that Colossus pounded into him, there wasn't anything she was going to do. So they literally pile him on the ground and collect the Hellfire Club. They celebrate Jean's addition as the Black Queen. Now she's wearing the corset and the rose, and she is full hardcore evil chick. And you get one of the most famous panels in comic history. You get Wolverine in the bottom of the sewers, dripping with stuff, and he goes, "Okay, suckers, you've taken your best shot. Now it's my turn." So what happens? X-Men are all defeated. Wolverine crawls up through the sewers and starts dropping people. And when I say people, I don't mean like faceless guys. I mean poor Angelo. Yeah, Angelo and Cole and
and the rest of the henchmen.
And Rosen. Yeah, it's like, man. There's even a scene where Wolverine talks one of them down, which is great. He's got a gun on him, and Wolverine looks, and he's like, man, this is going to hurt. And he just, "Hey, bub, I know what you're thinking. He's hurt, and he's 5 meters away from me. And I got a full clip of ammo in my rifle. Question is..." I love it. "Do you, punk?" I was like, no. So, we flash back to the Hellfire Club. They're all, in victory pose, snapshot, with the X-Men, bound up and their powers contained. And one just random thing, I love how Donald Pierce, the cyborg, is always sourpuss face this whole time. Okay. You know what I mean? Everyone else is like, "Ha ha ha, we're haughty and we've succeeded." Anytime you see him, he's just looks like someone peed in his Cheerios. And in the future, where you find out that he hates mutants, but he's, but he was only there for the power, it makes so much sense. He's like,
yeah,
"I'm in a den of mutants who are abusing other mutants so they can learn how to make more mutants. If this wasn't so financially advantageous, I would kill all of them." And here's where we kind of dive into the time slip, so to speak, the reality that Jean's experiencing as her former self. And in there, they've kind of changed the X-Men into reflections of the time, even going so far as to making Storm her slave. Yeah.
Again, something controversial.
Yeah, Storm, being a close friend, tries to speak out to her, but Jean is not having it because she's not Jean anymore. She's completely embraced this life of her ancestor, so to speak, because her ancestor does what she wants, when she wants, how she wants. So when Storm is calling out to her, she's like, no, don't talk to me like that. I'm in charge. I own you. Literally, I own you. So it's rough. What they kind of go back to is that, but when Jean and Scott were having that romantic moment, they decided to bond. Almost kind of permanently, where she would always be in his head and he would always be a little in hers. So he starts to kind of get a sense for what's going on, as the Hellfire Club are just kind of taunting everybody. We flash back, now that we have them in peril. Claremont is always going to poke back at other places and information where you can get more information to the story, where you can get other perspectives. So, Moira's always been part of the fold. So they use her to kind of up the ante. She's like, oh my god, this research information on Jean is off the charts, holy crap. They flash back to the professor. He's like, and he's finally opening up about his resentment and the way he's been reacting earlier, which, nice touch. One, it's a nice touch, but two, that pays off when we get into space.
Okay.
We'll get there.
We will.
So Wolverine finally makes it in to the Hellfire Club. They put a gun to his head. It's about to go down. The inner circle's all celebrating, and Cyclops is like, you know what? I know we're connected. Let me try and do this. And it's nothing he's ever done before, because he's not a psychic and he doesn't understand it. But there's such a strong connection that it leads him to Jean. And Jean has the power for him to psychically connect. And even worse, you have Mastermind, who's aware of what's going on because she's, with him, and he's like, yeah, come on in.
Yeah, he definitely interjects himself here.
Oh, yeah. So, in this Jean's fantasy world, and I love one of the things that happens here. Whenever Jean's experiencing her fantasy world, it's rich. All the details are there. Everything is really site-specific. But now that we're experiencing it through Cyclops, he's only getting bits and pieces. Because it's not his world, because he doesn't have psychic powers, but he's only seeing what he needs to in order to interact with it. And it's what Jean is kind of giving him. I thought that was a really cool touch. Now, they get Wingard and Cyclops get into a duel for Jean as Wolverine's trying to break in. And Wingard has this plot. He's like, yo, if I kill Cyclops, that's her last connection to this reality. She's mine. Cyclops just isn't that great with a sword. That's not how he learned how to fight. And he runs him through. What happens? The moment he runs him through, he screams, collapses to the ground. The other X-Men are like, oh my god, is he dead? What's going on? So they're all freaking out. Wingard thinks he's won the day, and Wolverine busts through into the room. The moment Wolverine busts through into the room, Mastermind, thinking, he's the bee's knees, he's like, yo, check this out. Y'all screwed up stopping the little man? My girl's gonna drop him. Check it. And he's like, get her. And she's like, bam, and she zaps him. But at the same time, she unhooks the device that's holding Cyclops. So Cyclops takes advantage, blasts it off, frees his teammates, and starts wrecking shop. And what's great here is because they're not being jumped like before, the X-Men systematically drop them quickly because they've shown their strengths. So it's like, no, they're not attacking, Sebastian Shaw directly. They're taking out the ground underneath him. Bam, he's gone. Big man who can use his gravity powers on us, let me hit you right in the face, knock you out of the fight right away. You know what I mean? So, they're jumping him. This also leads to one of my favorite moments when Wolverine jumps right at Harry Leland. And Harry Leland instinctively goes, haha, I'm increasing your mass. Oh, wait, you're on top of me. Ooh. And Mastermind, because he's an illusionist who manipulates people in the creepiest way possible, just kind of hides. But yeah, everyone's snapping. They pan away to Beast, who's an Avenger now. And I think this was a neat trick to get Beast into the story and keep the Avengers out.
Yes.
He's on monitor duty with the Avengers. And he's like, police, APB, Hellfire Club's being attacked by the X-Men. He's like, that's not right. Let me say this. Let me erase the file and go check it out. Really fun fight scenes. Colossus beating up the Cyborg, Storm, almost dropping Sebastian Shaw, and it ends up getting to a point where the X-Men do enough damage to send the Inner Circle running. The Inner Circle make it look really bad for the X-Men, and you get a scene where Jean Grey, now freed from his manipulation, gets to confront Mastermind. But in this, she's still in her Black Queen getup. She's still talking like that, and she's like, do you know? You came to me when I was vulnerable. You filled the emotional void within me. You even made me trust you, maybe even love you, and all the time you were using me? Well, she finds the device that let him put the illusions in her mind, crushes it. She looks into his eyes, and I love this. She goes, you gave me what I secretly wanted, and used it to destroy me. It's only fair I return the compliment. I mean, you sought power. And you know what? I'll give you power. So what does she do? She expands his consciousness to the point where he can, his mind expands at the speed of thought, racing instantly from one side of reality to the other through all the infinite reaches of space and time. In the blink of an eye, Mastermind finds himself in touch with the universe, his brain flooded with all the myriad absolute contradictory truths of existence. And then she watches him collapse into, a brain goo puddle. Damn. After that, she rejoins the X-Men. They leave, and they go to escape. As they're going, you have Jean kind of, oh man, it's too late. The police show up, they're escaping. Probably my least favorite part of the story happens here, where she goes, "Hear me, X-Men. I am no longer the woman you knew. I am fire. I am life incarnate now and forever. I am Phoenix." And then she blows up the ship. And the reason I say that is because, yeah, she's at that point. I feel like instead of being I have experienced more than you can comprehend, I am hungry for more. I need this. Instead of doing that, which I think would have made perfect sense, and then them maybe overreacting and causing a fight, she just goes full, mustache twirling. I'm wicked. Either way, so she blows up the ship. Everyone goes crashing to the ground. Claremont goes into good detail about how they save each other because they're a squad. If anyone kind of relied on themselves, maybe a couple of them would have made it out, but they're squad, so they fixed it. Everyone makes it safe. There's this huge storm, and they go to kind of knock her out. They're trying to figure out, how are we stopping her? This is weird. She's snapping with her power, and she's having a blast. This is crazy. So, Colossus goes to chuck a tree at her, and she's like, "Yeah, you're normal again. How do you like them apples?" So the tree starts collapsing on him, because as a person, he just kind of has normal beefy strength. And then Wolverine's like, "You know what? If I back you up, I can get you out of the way before that tree collapses on you." She goes, "Not if it's made out of gold." I'm holy crap. So Storm goes to blast her. And she's like, "Nah, you're not strong enough." And, she's pretty much just pimp smacking the X-Men. She's, at this point, you and I are quits now. Sorry, I just think that's funny. But she's like, "My destiny lies in the stars." So she's ready to leave. You flash back to the Hellfire Club, and they're like, "Yo, these X-Men, they suck, right?" So the Hellfire Club are like, "Yo, Senator, I know you loved our party until those X-Men ruined it. Would it be really cool to get Sentinels rolling to bash those little bastards?" And then there's, lightning storms at Central Park and this huge Firebird. At which point, Marvel realizes, much like in the movies, at some point you have to say, what about, this is pretty big. So they flash to a couple of people like the Fantastic Four, what the hell is that? And Spider-Man's like, what the hell is that? And Doctor Strange is like, what the hell is that? And Silver Surfer, he's not even on the planet, but he's like, what the hell is that? So then Jean flies off. Beast shows up in time to help save everyone and, get them the hell out of there. And this next portion I'm a little torn about. I just kind of describe what happened before I dive into specifics.
Okay.
So Jean flies out, and she's like, "Oh, I'm hungry," and she eats a star. And she's like, "Ah, ah, ah, ah." And she eats the energy, and as she eats the energy of the star, it supernovas and wipes out a planet. And there's the Shi'ar Empire out there, and they're like, "Holy crap, that's jacked." Do we have anyone in the area? They're like, "Yeah, we got a big old battleship," and it's and it starts firing on her. So she takes out the big-ass battleship. And then, they contact Lilandra, and she's like, "Man, this is crazy." And then they flash back to the X-Men. And the reason I say that I'm kind of torn about it is, as a space opera, perfect. You bring her into space, you introduce the next big conflict, it makes sense. But I also feel like her eating a star and blowing up that planet are there to give her something to be really upset about later that has no stakes. It's an alien race that's never been introduced. No one cares. They don't exist. If, for example, if they were flying and she starts flying away and, she saw a plane coming at her that she just wasn't paying attention to and incinerated the plane and everyone on it. Think about how much worse that would have been. How did the X-Men respond to her incinerating a jumbo jet full of people? How does she respond to that? And how does she respond to the fact that it felt good? If it wasn't if the Phoenix Force wasn't an entity from outer space and it was just Jean as a person, like a moment like that would have been like, to me, would have had like 10 times the impact of her eating that star.
Absolutely, and I think that's kind of what we see in the film adaptation at some point.
It's I don't know,
maybe not on the scale that you and I would like, but
there's always some sort of murder or sacrifice or something.
Yeah, it's there,
but it's never
potent enough.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like I feel like at this point she's so. And the way the graphic novel is written, the way it was written in the comics, is about her freedom. It's about her agency. And I think if it was something like that, where it was just kind of a snap decision, that's all about her freedom and her agency. And when she comes back, that would be an easy fix. The X-Men are like, whoa, that was broken. You gotta find a way where that doesn't happen again. And, she's like, there's nothing wrong with me that isn't broken. I can do what I want, and you have the conflict, and it explodes. Not important, we're getting back to what actually exists. So after the alien stuff, we flash back to Earth, where you're checking in with the X-Men, and Cyclops goes, it's Phoenix. I can sense her in my mind. She's returning to Earth, and she's hungry. Because it's very much like that. So, you see in outer space, Lalandra, she's talking with the others, she's like, this is jacked. And you go to Earth, and they're like, yo. And the president's like, this is jacked. And then you go to Beast and the X-Men. And, Beast and Cyclops and Storm, they're trying to figure out what they're doing and how they're going to do it. Beast is like, yo, I have this device that should knock her out. And, Storm and Cyclops are trying to figure out how we're doing this. And Storm is there to kind of, give us a play-by-play on how Scott's doing. Because he's, you know what? We're going to do this. We got to plan this. We got to make it right. Beast is, I'm going to work on this device. I'm going to figure this out. It's going to be awesome. Storm is, you sound like you're in some shit. You need a vacation. This is awful. I've never heard you in this shape. Which is, a really cool dichotomy there with the characters. Then you have Wolverine, Colossus, and Nightcrawler, and they're trying to, work out, trying to do their team mechanics, really trying to keep themselves busy. So what happens? Jean shows up to her parents' house. And it's overwhelming because at this point, when normally she tries not to read other people's thoughts, but at this point they're invading her. She can't not have them. And at first, her mother loves her, and her sister is worried about her, and her father's worried about her. But then, she's even catching the stuff that they're not conscious of. So it becomes, subconsciously they're afraid of her. Subconsciously they're not cool with mutants. And she starts responding to that instead of what they're saying. So things start kind of getting out of hand. When she leaves to kind of clear her head, she you realize that the X-Men ambush is on. It's too misty for her to see Nightcrawler, who pops the device on her head that's supposed to knock her out. She chucks him. She starts freaking out. But even in this case, she's still strong enough to put up more of a fight than Jean Grey would have in the past. So Colossus goes to grab her, and she sends him flying, and Storm goes, and she zaps him, and Beast grabs, there's this back and forth. And there is the first of what have become, unfortunately, many moments where Wolverine takes her down, and he pops his claws, and she goes, do it! He's like, well, what? Because here you have Wolverine, he's thinking, she's still too strong, she's getting stronger, I gotta drop her. Wolverine's a merc, this is what he does, he gets it. But she does the only thing that would have possibly stopped him in that moment. She begs him to do it. And that was enough for him to pause and be like, wait, what? She switches back, blasts him off, takes off the thing, and grabs all the X-Men like they're play toys. The only thing that stops her there is Cyclops. And he's talking to her, and she's like, I won't listen. He's like, no, I'm talking to you. I love you. Let's figure this out. At which point you see what's going on. She's like, yes, no, I hunger for joy, a rapture beyond all, I need this. It's consuming me. At which point he's like, it doesn't have to. We can help. And then Professor X just blasts the crap out of her. And at which point she snaps again. She blasts Cyclops. She blasts the professor. Professor is on the ground. He's like, yo. She's like, I'ma kill you. And he's like, bring it. He's like, you can't stop me. He's like, bring it, girl. And in this moment, she's like, you're the one who taught me how to use my powers. You're the one who's caused this. And he's like, you're right, and I'm going to stop it. So she flares up, and he fights, and they have this big battle of wills where she's this giant psychic bird, and he's got tears streaming down his face. And the idea of the struggle is cool. Like, the visual representation is interesting, but, like, if they ever decided to do something like that in different media, they'd need to do something completely different for that to work. Mm-hmm. Not important. But what happens is she drops, he wins. And in this way, it's less I beat you down, but it's more like I've contained you within a network of breakers. Like, you are this uncontrollable amount of electricity, and I set a whole bunch of breaker boxes ready to stop this. And as she crashes to the ground, the first thought out of the professor is what you need to hear in this moment is like, I would have lost. But Jean was fighting too. Like, she was fighting herself. And, I'm so proud of you. It's the only way we made it out of this alive. And she hits the ground, and Cyclops catches her, and she hears his thought. And she's like, yo, that sounds like a proposal. And he's like, well, it is. So they kiss, and they're all happy, and Jean's parents run out. Which is the first time anyone realizes she's naked. Her dad throws a robe on her. Her dad goes to snap, and, he goes to talk to the professor, and poof, they're gone. Everyone was like, wait, what the hell? At which point, bam, big splash panel, we're in outer space. And while we're on break, why don't you take in a movie? If you're looking for movie tickets, or if you're looking to purchase a movie for home streaming, you can do it through Fandango, and you can do it with our assistants helping out the podcast. All you have to do is go to schoolforthegifted.site/podcast/Fandango. Why are we in outer space? Because Jean Grey blew up a planet, and, if we think genocide's bad, holy crap, wiping out an entire planet is even worse. That brings us to the place where, Jean Grey is going to be on trial. Now, this is the X-Men, and that Xavier spent a lot of time with Lilandra. They're, they in love, y'all. So the professor is kind of like soaked in enough of the culture where he declares for a duel of honor. The idea being, this is a court, she's going to be ruled, she's going to be killed, unless the only way out of this is a duel of honor. The problem being, if you lose the duel, chances are she dies anyway, and all the people who are dueling on your behalf die too. So it's like, we believe in her so much, we're willing to put our lives on the line for hers. So Lilandra is kind of like the point, and then the Kree and the Skrull are like, what? So they take a step back. They're like, what the hell? And Lilandra's like, yo, we got to do this. This is what we do. Like, we don't trust this. Like, she's like, they ain't gonna win. It's cool. So, what do they do? And I love this. The thing is decreed. They say there's no way they can win, and we go back to the X-Men. And they're like, it begins at dawn. Tonight's yours. And they give them the most elegant rooms and all the food they want, and you get to see everyone and how they spend those times. Like Jean Grey, she's kind of trying to come to terms with what's happened. She's like, it was terrible, but it was beautiful, and I didn't want the power, and I didn't mean to do it, but man, I did at the same time. And she's having that issue, and everyone's kind of finding their space. And Claremont gives them all enough time to kind of really, it's meditative, where you get to kind of see what's going on, where Wolverine is trying to center himself and meditate, and Beast is, just enjoying a good back rub. Everyone is well in that space, where you even see, like, being in outer space is wearing on Storm because of her connection with the earth. She's like, man, they say it's morning because a chime went off. There's no sun here. What the hell? And she's also, so everyone's getting, like, homesick and thinking about what's going on. And we're suddenly seeing, once again, not only is this, because of how things gone, not only are we risking Jean Grey, but we're risking all of the X-Men because of the trial. And all of them, and showing like what all of them have to live for, and all of them have been through. So they come back together, and I love this moment. Even after all they've been through, Cyclops is still, I want to tell you, I'm fighting for Jean. And I won't ask any of you to join me. I haven't the right. And I won't think any less of you if you decide not to. And Angel's like, yo, we already talked before you got here, and we're rolling with you, ride or die. Like, it doesn't matter. And I thought that was a really cool scene. Like, we're fam no matter whether you're in this fight or not. In fact, I'd prefer you not, because I care about you. And they're like, no, we couldn't live with ourselves. We're doing this. So the fight goes down, and poof, they're on this alien world, and, people decide to... An Angel, who hasn't been on the team, reacts as Angel always did. He takes to the sky, he's ready to do his Angel thing, and Scott has already taken stock of what's going on. He's like, no, don't do it! He gets caught, Storm goes to rescue him, they realize that the skies might be a problem. And here, what happens? They're gathered in this spot, and Wolverine's like, all right, what do we do? And Cyclops was like, okay, we're ready. We're doing this on our terms. There are going to be these two teams. We're going to hit them. We're going to move. Why? Because they're ready for us. They're prepared for us to be sitting in this space. They're ready to overpower us. Screw that. We're going to roll. We're going to hit them. We're going to move. If we're going to make it out of this, we're going to do it because we're faster, because we know each other better. So they go for it. So he starts giving instructions on how to kind of stay ahead of things. You have classic X-Men battles where, like, they're up against enemies they don't know, and surprises happen. Like, I'm a big robot, and Colossus, like, starts jacking him. Everyone's ready to do something. Then all of a sudden, the dude jumps out of his bag. Like, how many robots have papooses? You know what I mean? So it's always, like, something strange. It's like, okay, those two are fighting. We're about to back them up, and someone attacks us from behind. The X-Men, especially under Claremont, are experts at getting, like, screwed in the worst possible ways. There's a moment where Wolverine's knocked out of the fight long enough for Storm to get jacked. There's a kind of weird scene where he meets the Watcher. I think that's more because, Claremont is a Fantastic Four fan. But it also gives us, like, the classic Wolverine's friend coming up to him. I'm pretty sure this was the first time that happened to him as well. Storm comes up to Wolverine and he's like, hey, buddy. He's like, no, you're wrong, and fights. But what ends up happening is the X-Men are doing an amazing job fighting odds that they had no chance with. There's a scene where Colossus takes a giant, massive pillar, whacks one of the dudes in the face with it, and he doesn't flinch. Like, these are odds that they've never been up against before. And they fight, and one at a time you see them drop, but you see the people they were fighting like, holy crap, they almost took me. You know what I mean? So they kind of a Pyrrhic victory there. And you go back to Lalandra's ship, and you just see Charles, like, practically weeping because he's watching them cut down, like, all of his students. And you get near the end, and it's just Cyclops and Jean. And you see, like, them holding their own against a couple of the people they're fighting on. And then you see backup coming from the ones who were dropping their other friends. And then the camera kind of zooms out, and then there's a big explosion, and he's like, oh my god. And they're like, the Phoenix is back. Because they ended up fighting so hard that Jean Grey went full Firebird. And as that's happening, you see, like, Storm crawling out from her butt kick, like the other X-Men kind of coming out of the woodworks, finally having recovered from their beatings they took. And they're like, we got to stop her. And Wolverine, since they're on a moon, Wolverine can now chuck Colossus, which is extra funny because Colossus has always been chucking Wolverine. Mm-hmm. But Wolverine knows that Colossus is strong enough to stop it. Like, if he throws him, he can turn metal and just take her down. And in that flight, Colossus is all in his head. And as he punches her in the face, he's like, I can't do it. Like, all this has happened after I had to kill Moira's son. I can't kill my friend. Like,
and so he pulls his punch.
And she ends up hitting the ground. And she has a tearful moment where, she's like, the Phoenix is such power. I can't be contained or controlled. Return it to the cosmos, which is its home. Kill me. And Cyclops is like, no. She forces them into a situation where if even one more person dies at my hands, it's better this way. It's quick, it's clean, it's final. And they're on the moon, and she gets zapped and turned into dust in her last moment as a human. And her last word is literally his name. She yells out Scott, he yells out Jean. He's sitting there kind of going through all the stuff that she did, kind of like processing, because that's Cyclops. He verbally processes. And then you kind of flash to the Watcher, who's just in here to hammer the message home to anyone too stupid to catch what's happening. And he's like, Jean Grey could have lived to become a god, but it was more important for her that she die a human. And that's the end of the story. I feel like some of the greatest strengths and weaknesses of the story come from the serialized nature of it. And when I say that, when you start, we care about these characters as much as we do because we followed them through their other adventures. Because it's a serialized story and you're allowed to go to an ice cream shop. And you're allowed to have a romantic dinner in New Mexico on top of a mesa. You know what I mean? There are these flourishes that you can do that allow us to really feel things, to let things settle, to let things grow, to let things shift. The weaknesses we get from being there is, the Claremont recap, or like the way this graphic novel unfolds. It kind of doesn't feel like the Dark Phoenix Saga until they've already invaded the Hellfire Club. You know what I mean? But that connection with the team is necessary for it to even matter. So, I mean, there's pros, there's cons, but there's so much of this that is epic and beautiful, and there are so many themes in there that are a necessity. Like, if you go back to page 28, like way near the beginning, they kind of give hints that when she's talking about her trips to the past and the things that she enjoys, like, you kind of give hints that this is part of her awakening as a person, personality-wise, her strength, her sexuality, where it kind of works both as a tale where she's coming into her own. So, like, there's a lot of great here. In my heart of hearts, I wish that the Dark Phoenix was never a cosmic entity. I think that's allowed for it to come back and do other stories and things and interact with other people. There's a great story that came from that, the younger version of Jean Grey when she was brought into the future. That would be the Jean Grey miniseries and the all-new X-Men books from 2017, give or take. In the service of this story, I think it would have been much better if it was just Jean and just her potential and just her ability. What are your big takeaways from this?
I agree with you about how it should have been more about Jean Grey and her potential and her energy as opposed to making the Phoenix a cosmic being. Simply because, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but you have the X-Men as a unit, with or without the Professor. The battles they have, even from the beginning, from their origins, were with society, with the differences in society. And I think that's where they function best, is when you do have that, things like anti-mutant sentiment and something that's more socially or politically charged involving them, as opposed to something cosmic. That's kind of always been a gripe with me, just being a Marvel fan, and that relationship. It's a stretch. I know it's meant to be a stretch, to put yourself out there, put your imagination out there into the cosmic universe and have at it with characters. But to me, it's still a point of contention here where you shouldn't have had to go otherworldly in order to get this story across. They could have easily done it on Earth amongst themselves, and it come across as almost like a mental issue at times. I think that would have been, I just think there's so much more potential in that as opposed to, hey, she's a big cosmic flying bird now,
And I know there are people who are fans of the cosmic stuff.
Yeah, no,
and I'm not poo-pooing all of that.
I don't want to poo-poo on that either. I think when it's done correctly, it's great.
I've always enjoyed the relationship between Professor X and Lilandra. If you are a fan of the reprintings that came out under the title Classic X-Men, there was a backstory in one issue where they had Professor X, how he kind of spent some of his free time there, where there was a great story because he was human. Everyone kind of looked at him like a third-class citizen, or if he was mentally stunted, which his ego could not handle, because being one of the smartest men on Earth.
Obviously. And
he ended up spending an afternoon with basically a space janitor, and she really gave him an amazing perspective on life that kind of balanced him and made him a better man. And that's all in like 10 pages. So like there's great stuff from space, especially like the Christmas Story with Kitty and the Brood, the Brood Mutants. Like there's a lot of great stuff. Like even they make reference to the M'Kron crystal and all that madness from way back in the day. You know, the space stuff works best, like with the Astonishing X-Men and Ord and that, when it is a specific situation that makes sense. When they're strangers in a strange land, or they're being manipulated in someone else's game or something like that. But I feel like this, it was used as trying to put a big cap on a big story. You know, what's the biggest climax we can do? You know, all the X-Men getting dropped in a scene, and you know this, where that wasn't this story. We can I'll gladly talk and argue about it later, but that's where I am with this. You have an amazing story. There are a couple of caveats taken to allow for the character to come back, and those were the spots that weakened the story. But yes, I do absolutely love this beast. There's a lot of X-Men that never happens without the existence of this.
True.
There's a lot of media outside of X-Men that doesn't happen without the existence of this. For all the flaws that we are, podcasting and pointing out, Claremont is a comic book religious figure for producing this, amongst many other things. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not going to sleep on that, that is just how it is. But yeah, like that's the source material. Flawed, but not nearly as flawed in some of the things it's produced. But at the core, Claremont would always remind us of is without connection, there's no story. And without Jean Grey having changed in ways we could see, without the friendships being established in order to show them tested and broken, without the story survived in order to change our characters and watch them respond to. There's so many moments where it's like, bam, Wolverine tackles him, he has his claws out, he could kill her, like that. But there's a relationship, but there's a desire there, and there's an innocence to her that connects to him. And the moment that innocence returns, he can't do it. There's a moment he chucks Colossus at her, and that could be the end of the story. But Colossus had to grab the living energy of another being maybe a month ago and crush it out of existence. And he can't do it again. Yeah. Like, just that was tearing at him. And that's someone he doesn't know. And they're asking him to do that to a friend, and he can't do it. So then what do you have? You have this moment where Jean, the most powerful creature on the earth, has the only way that thing can be stopped is by Jean, the person who's at the core of this, the person who's been hurt the most and been hurting others the most, has to be vulnerable long enough to let it go.
And on that note, we're going to end class. Keep in mind, we are available on social media and the internet. Email us at s4theg@gmail.com with your questions, comments, and concerns. You can also find us on Instagram, instagram.com/SFTGfaculty, all one word. We're also on Twitter, twitter.com/SFTGfaculty.
SFTG?
And on Facebook as well. Our official Facebook page is over at facebook.com/schoolfortheg, all one word. And of course, our home on the web is schoolforthegifted.site. That's .site for those who need the clarification. Again, we have just covered the Dark Phoenix Saga. Please take time to support the site and support the show and pick up a copy through us.
And if you have the opportunity, make sure you read it before you see Dark Phoenix and, compare, contrast, see what's beautiful, see what's not.
Pick up a copy over at schoolforthegifted.site/podcast/Amazon and help support the show. Amazon will show us a little love. You don't pay anything extra. You'll still get it at Amazon prices. If you're looking for the back issues, you can also support your School for the Gifted here and look them up and purchase them through us over at schoolforthegifted.site/podcast/Newcadia. That's NEWKADIA. Until next time, class is dismissed.
allow you to control my mind. Won't allow